All right, so now that you have your line work pretty much set up, I'd like you to navigate into your CAD graphics folder and go to Illustrator and then take a look at this diagram swatches. It's in your Illustrator swatches folder. If you open that file up, you see we have a whole bunch of swatches, lines, annotations, symbols, etc. And I thought I would just kind of show you how you can use these. We're going to be using a few of these hatches a little later on in this tutorial series, but it's good to just have it open and familiarize yourself with what's available here. We have a bunch of textures and colors that can be used. We have a whole bunch of alternative swatches, and then these are called CAD swatches. These are the typical ones that come directly from AutoCAD. So when you begin to use AutoCAD next year, these will begin to be more familiar to you. A lot of them are pretty self-explanatory for what they stand for. All of the blocks kind of tend to stand for paving or bricks or other hardscape layers. A lot of these other symbols can be used for planting or mulch, gravel or sand. We have concrete texture. That's only used when the concrete has been cut in section. We have more bricks and paving. These symbols, they do have some meaning to them. So maybe I will post like a little cheat sheet on Moreau that kind of tells you what they're typically used for. But for now, you can just grab a few of them and copy them into your palette. Now over here we have some trees, but we actually have access to a greater number of trees if we go back into our Illustrator folder and go to blocks, and we open up the trees in plan folder. So we have trees plan, and we have this other one, trees 2. Trees in plan is a fairly good folder. I organized this for the class last year. Has lots of different options. Some of them are better for coniferous trees, others are better for deciduous trees. Some of them have branches, some of them are more simple, some of them are quite detailed. And you can see there's multi-stem varieties, shading, shadows, textures, etc. So this should give you plenty of options to bring into your plans. And I'm just going to show you how you might edit and use one of these trees. So I'm going to zoom in on this one. So I'm just going to zoom in, and I can see that there's like an extra circle on this one. I'm just going to delete it. And then the edge of this tree seems to be in disconnected chunks. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and select the outer edges of this tree. And I'm going to keep selecting until I have all of the outside boundaries. And then I'm going to use Control J to join this together. That's going to make one unified boundary all the way around. And so if I click away and then click back, you can see it selects the whole thing as a boundary. And now I can change that if I want to. But I'm just going to use Control C to copy this file and then paste it into my drawing here. So now I can drag it into place, and it's looking pretty good in terms of scale and size of the canopy. And I'm going to just zoom in and ungroup it. So if I ungroup it now, I can manipulate all of the different edges to get them different line weight. So I'm going to give this edge a thicker line weight, and then I'm going to select the whole layer, deselect the outside, and then change that to a thinner line weight, maybe 0.25 or something like that. So it's really light. So now we see the branch structures have really faded back. The outside edge takes the priority, and that's exactly what we want. Maybe I'll just pop this down to 1.5. Just so it doesn't stand out too much. And now we have a tree, so I can select the whole thing and group it so that I can move it around independently. But actually, I think what I would like to do is give it a light opaque fill in the background. If I just choose the fill here and choose white, so I basically just double clicked on the fill layer and selected white from my palette, I can then send that to the back of this layer structure by right-clicking on the tree and going Arrange, Send to Back. But I would like this to have an opacity. Now, if I just open up the opacity in the Appearance palette here, and if you can't see that, you can just go up to the window and select Appearance here. It's going to change the opacity of the entire tree, including the lines, and I really don't want that. So I can see that this is a group. That's what it says in the Appearance palette. So I'm first going to right click and go ungroup. And then I'm going to go back to my appearance palette and select that outer edge, which has the fill applied to it. And I can see I have a little box here for fill for the opacity. And now I can just change the opacity of that background fill to 50%. So now I have a tree and I can select it and group it again, Control G for group. And now I'm going to make that a symbol. I'm going to make it a symbol so that I can reuse it throughout my drawing. So I will just use the window symbol to get to the symbols, and then I'm going to rename this tree 50% opacity. I'm going to change it to a graphic type, use the dynamic symbol, and I don't think we need to worry about any of the other settings here, so I'll just click OK. And now you can see it shows up in my symbols palette. I can dock that over to my side here if I want to. And now I can copy this tree, and I'm just clicking on it and pressing down Alt and Shift. Alt copies and Shift constrains it to an orthogonal direction. So I'm just using Alt and Shift to drag this tree around, and then using the arrows to sort of move these trees into place according to the tree circles that I had on my plan. So Alt and Shift again to bring it down, Alt and Shift to bring down my last tree, and now I have the 7 trees of my plan. The great thing about using symbols is that if I want to change anything about them, I can just change one and all of them will update. So let's say, for example, I want to change the opacity of the background. I can change that here, and I'll change it to 35% or maybe 65% if I wanted it to be a lot more opaque. And when I close out of this, all of the layers are updated. So I just double click outside of the selection, and all of the trees have been automatically updated. So I've noticed that in this tree, I missed one of the edges. It's not quite closed off properly, so I want to change the line weight. So I'm just going to double click on it and select that little piece. Then I can use the eye for eyedropper and select the stroke of the tree edge around it. And now I have successfully closed off that edge so that it's the same line weight as the rest of the edge of the tree. And all of the tree symbols have been automatically updated. So I don't need to go through and do it for each tree individually. So this is why we use symbols. If you're going to be using the same tree in your file over and over again, it's worthwhile just to create a symbol. So that way, again, when you want to change the opacity of the background or anything else about the tree, you can update it and it will update all of the trees at the same time. So now we have our line work and we have brought in a block and created a symbol. And that's really looking good now. But what else can we do with this drawing? First, I would like you to go back to our diagram swatches and look for this little north arrow. Now your north direction might be different from mine. Mine is a made up site, so I'm just going to orient mine north to the page. And I'm just going to drag down this symbol down to the annotation layer. You see, I just click this square and drag it down to the annotation. And I'll resize this. I press Shift to constrain the proportions while I'm resizing it. And I'm going to drag it over to the side of my, my annotation, my drawing title here, and just move this around and kind of get them aligned. Now I'll double click within this grouped object and select the text and just change it so it's the same font as my other text in the drawing. So now we have a north arrow. If your north arrow is oriented differently, just make sure that it's oriented correctly. And finally, I'm just going to rename this layer to trees and then save my file. I'm going to save over top of this demo plan 50, but I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to append it with _r.1. That stands for revision 1. So now I have the original file just in case I ever need it. And I also have my first revision, which is how this plan is right now.